Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This episode 69, nice recording on Friday, March 21st. The NCAA tournament is going on, but I decided to take, I've seen a lot of basketball. I'll take a quick break and talk some Vikings football, some actual football, some stuff about the signings that the Vikings made. In recent weeks, there have been a lot of them. It's fun to talk about. It's way more fun to talk about than the other thing that I'll mention at the top. First, this show, as always, is presented by First Resource Bank. If you haven't heard of it, it's a member FDIC bank in the local Minneapolis area, run by phenomenal people who care about the community. Tim Siegley runs the thing. His son Aaron is a part of it. Charlie Anderson is another staffer internally that these guys, they love the Vikings. So does Christy, who works at the front desk of the Washington location. And if you want a bank that really has a great online platform, branches all over the area, and people who really care about people who have accounts with them, please go check out the links in the description below. You can find out how to get an account. So I'd appreciate you guys doing that. It's the NCAA tournament. You guys are here for Viking stuff, but I obviously love the thing. I do one bracket. I don't know how some people do like 7 of them. But if that's your thing, that's your thing, and I fully appreciate it. We've done a lot of conversation over the last couple of weeks about the quarterback stuff, whether it's Darnold, whether it's JJ, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, and frankly, just speaking to you guys, because I appreciate you listening and being here and supporting. I'm tired of the conversation. I really am. I think there are a lot of people that believe that, it's gunning for engagement or trying and I would say the last thing I want to do is be talking about all this. The Vikings made a lot of moves in the last 2 weeks that have allowed me to watch film of new players and talk to people about them and where they come from and why the additions make sense. And that is the stuff, if you guys have been listening since last fall, that I love to do. And so that's what we're going to do because I love talking about the game. I am fascinated by roster building and the way the Vikings have gone about putting together a roster that is very exciting to assess on paper. And so that's what we're going to do. If you just step back for a second and think about, what the Vikings did coming out of the scouting combine in Indianapolis. Go back. I wouldn't ask you to go back and listen, but you remember the expectation then. They're going to add some beef to the interior on both sides, and they're going to try to be creative with some of the moves that they've made. If you would have told me, or if I would have told you then that this team is about to spend upwards of $250 million with a bunch of captains, Walter Payton Men of the Year, and then some young players with upside, you'd probably been like, dang, they can do that? How could they do that? Yeah, they've got a lot of cap space, up, 60 million, but they can do that. I even at Cover the Team, talking to people internally, I would have had questions of how could they possibly do that? Because it's a competitive market. And that's just the case. That's the factors at play would make it hard to believe that they'd be able to do all that. And then you compound that with while also spending upwards of $250 million and bringing in the amount of pieces that they brought in, they're also going to position themselves for probably 2 compensatory picks, maybe as high as the 3rd and 4th round. So they're replenishing draft capital that they've traded. And they're also revamping the roster. And while, yes, if you look at the salary cap for 2026, you guys are probably like, yeah, but they're not going to have any salary cap space next season. Well, there are multiple levers that they can pull to get back under the cap and have money to spend. And that's restructures for players. That's rolling over cap space from this season to next season. That's cutting players, veteran players that don't align like they have over the past couple years. And so it is it's just, when you really take a step back and look at it, because we've been shrouded in all of this other conversation that I know a lot of people think was created out of thin air. And what I would say is I I really trust the reporting that I've done on it. But when you really step back, I mean, 2 interior offensive linemen, 2 interior defensive linemen, all very proven players. Cornerback, they kept Byron Murphy Jr. They added multiple young players who, yeah, there are questions with Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah, injury related. Obviously, Isaiah Rodgers, I think, was missed the entire 2023 season with the gambling situation, and hasn't played. He didn't play a ton in Philadelphia. They brought back Aaron Jones, who is, I mean, you're not going to really find a guy who has the 3-down skill set that he had. You weren't going to find it on the free agent market, and then to expect a draft player to just come right in and be able to do that, probably would have had to spend a first-round pick on that player for that to be the case. So you bring him back. We could talk about his deal and the numbers and all that, but you also pair him to kind of provide insurance for him, considering what he's navigated from an injury perspective over the course of his career. You pair him with a 25-year-old who you watched in your own stadium against a very good run defense in 2024, have 20 carries and 100 yards, pressing the edge, cutting back, being very physical. And they did all this. And again, they still have cap space. They created the compensatory picks. And I'm not acting like this is the greatest free agency period of all time, because partly last year's free agency period was as good as it was. And there are definite questions about durability, about health, age. There are a lot of questions to ask, but I do think if you don't take a step back, and if I don't in my role, and just realize the amount of savvy, strategic, very wide-ranging decisions and moves that were made over the last couple of weeks, and think highly of it, it'd be faulty to do that. I mean, because we are well into the conversation, I'm going to get specific on all of these guys, but I'm going to start kind of with where I think the credit is owed. I mean, first, I don't think, and I you guys know with my reporting, like, it's subjective as I can possibly be, but I think there should be praise for ownership for being willing to spend the amount of money that they have spent and allowing the Vikings to structure contracts the way that they have, with backloaded contracts, with void years to be able to spread out money. Like, all of that stuff has to pass through ownership. And even though the salary cap exists, a team has to be willing to spend. And I think besides the New England Patriots, who have poured in a lot of money, and really they had to because of the amount of holes that they had on their roster, you give the Vikings credit for spending where they did, and ownership credit for spending where they did in this period. Then I think you got to talk about the front office and the coaching staff for identifying players that they felt like made sense for the spots that they wanted to fill. I mean, and you got to give them credit too for creating an environment that players in a very competitive market would want to come play for. I mean, it works both ways in all respects. And not all, but a lot of the Vikings additions did virtual availabilities this past week. And a lot of them went on and on about the way the Vikings organization run things and how it's perceived. And a lot of that stuff can wade into you. Almost feel like it's, I mean, just an advertisement for the Vikings. But I mean, you talk to people, and I had conversations. I'd mentioned this on my last podcast, but I had a conversation. I got a text, and then I talked to on the phone the dad of a player who has had a competitive market this cycle. And he said to me, like, man, how much I would love for my son to be in purple for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the environment that the Vikings have set up. And like, again, it's not for me to just spout that. If you hear that from parents, it says something, certainly. So you give them credit for structuring the environment that they have and having the success that they've had, but also they identified these players as possibilities. A Javon Hargrave, the defensive tack, and he clarified that his name is Javon and not Javon. So I botched that many times before now, but I no longer will, because I don't want to mess with Javon Hargrave. Let me tell you, that guy is in a one-on-one battle, not what many offensive linemen want to see. And you guys can see me if you're watching on YouTube. And it's not something I want to mess with. But the Vikings identified that he would probably be a potential release from the San Francisco 49ers. And what did that mean for them? Well, it meant that they could pay him any amount of money and it would not affect their compensatory formula. Now, you wade into a lot of jargon with the compensation picks, and hopefully my hope is over the next couple weeks, I can bring someone on whose expertise is compensatory picks, because I think it would be educational for me and for you guys. And it'd just be interesting to hear the dynamics of someone who is fascinated in that subject, because it gets very dense. But because the players who are cut don't apply to the comp formula, it is very savvy to identify that market and then target it. And that is what they did. So again, that's where you talk about the front office, you talk about the coaching staff. Jonathan Allen is in that same boat. That's another aspect of this period that I think is worth mentioning. And then I do think, like, there is an immense amount, you never see it or hear about it behind the scenes, partly because that's just not the way these two specifically operate. But Rob Brzezinski, who manages the salary cap with Emily Battis, I mean, they do a lot of the negotiating on these types of deals, and they have relationships with the agents and the representatives, and there is a trust that has to be established between both sides, where the Viking staff dealing with these negotiations, and the agents and the representatives have to have trust that the Vikings are being truthful in how they view things. That takes time to build up, and that's really where Rob Brzezinski has gotten to a place, having been with the Vikings for 2 decades. And then it's not only the negotiations that these two kind of specifically, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been a part of it, but that they have orchestrated, but it's also being mindful of what the structure is going to look like for these contracts to maximize this year, maximize the future. So that is also a very intentional process, and one that I just felt like is worth highlighting. So that's kind of the beginning of the convo. And then you get in to the specifics of each player and the players and the positions that they targeted, and why, to me, it feels worth exploring even further. And let's start with Ryan Kelly, who spoke to the media on Thursday. And it was probably a 15-minute conversation. And again, it was virtual. So to act like I gleaned everything or anything of real substance would probably be foolish on my end. But I was just very impressed by the awareness that he talked about the Vikings opportunity and about how he thinks about offensive line play. Ryan Kelly has dealt with, like I talked about, a lot of injuries. So his durability is going to be the question. But if he can remain healthy and the Vikings training staff can get him to an optimal place, he spoke Thursday about how in Indianapolis, he controlled the pass protection unit. He managed the run game, identification, where runs should be headed. And so to have a player with that level of experience, not that Garrett Bradbury didn't, but Ryan Kelly has done this in Indianapolis for a very long time, and they have had some very stout offensive line groups. To have a player with that skill set and that aptitude and that level of awareness, working with a potential young quarterback, and just in general as the head of the snake of, probably the most underrated unit in football. And you guys know this. I'm not breaking ground here. I'm not breaking information, but I mean, I think even with the Philadelphia Eagles run, if you talk to people around that and you look at what they've done up there, one of, I mean, the most underrated and the biggest strengths of what that team has been able to do is they have an offensive line coach in Jeff Stoutland who maximizes that unit for the court. And I've said unit many times, so I'm getting frustrated with myself on that, just so you guys know. But they they have maximized those five and what that means for protection in the pass game and, direction and physicality and toughness in the run game. So, I mean, Ryan Kelly has seen everything. There is nothing that he has not seen. He played at Alabama. He is a no-nonsense type of guy. I don't expect me to be doing many flowery features or conversations with Ryan Kelly because he is as offensive line type of personality as you're probably going to find. But I was just very struck by the way that he talked about things when he spoke to the media on Thursday. And so to have him, I'm not saying in leading with him because I think that is the most important signing, but if he can stay healthy, I do think it's a massive one because it allows the rest of the interior to I mean, they have more of an anchor there, and just the communication level of a guy who has done it for as long as he's done it is just massive. Then you go to Will Fries. I mean, this is a guy who was a 7th round pick, who comes into a very, I mean, optimal environment for offensive line development, but was very motivated and just proved himself time and time again. I mean, Ryan Kelly, who was his teammate, talked about just the arc of Will Fry's career and how much work he put in, how well he blended in with the Colts unit that has had other incredible has had other very highly regarded players, specifically Quentin Nelson at left guard. And yes, he did break his tibia. He broke his tibia last year and is still within the recovery process of that. But as long as that recovery goes the way that the Vikings want it to go, I mean, you pair the continuity of a guy who is willing to work as hard as he has shown he's willing to work to make it, coming from being a 7th rounder, with a player that he knows in Ryan Kelly. I mean, you just can imagine that right side of the line of scrimmage being much more formidable. And then, like, you also think down the line, at least I do in my role, and it's like, so let's say the right side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you got Ryan Kelly working that way. You got Will Fries at right guard. You got Brian O'Neill at right tackle. And then you put Josh Oliver over there now, and the type of indent, the type of dent you can put in the defensive line on that side of the line of scrimmage. And then on the other side, you got Christian Darrisaw, and you put Josh Oliver over there. You always know you're going to get a push on that side. So it's it's an exponential factor for everything. Obviously, pass protection, the interior, which is the bane of any quarterback's existence. But then what it can mean for the run game, and then how that all can tie together. I mean, it's easy to kind of think forward. I mean, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave are guys who can win one-on-one pass rush situations, and that's what Brian Flores is as good as anybody at doing, is structuring the look of his defense to where the offensive line does not have much of a choice. They have to defend one-on-one at some place on the line of scrimmage. And in the past, Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, Jerry Tillery, that's just not their skill set. It's nothing against any of those three, but now you have Jonathan Allen, who has proven over the course of his career, and Javon Hargrave, who has also proven over the course of his career and a lengthy career that they can win those matchups. And so if you're Brian Flores, no longer do you just have to find a way to create one-on-ones for Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and potentially Dallas Turner or Ivan Pace or Blake Cashman. No. Now you feel very comfortable having one-on-ones all across the line of scrimmage to where the opposing team and the preparation they are going to have to do is even further more stressful, further heightened. I mean, you already applied maximum stress because you are Brian Flores, and that is what he does. And so to have guys on the interior who are going to be able to win in one-on-ones, and then I just envision like you line up. Okay, you've got a 4-man front: Grenard, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, and Van Ginkel. And then you put 2 guys in the A gap in Ivan Pace Jr. and Blake Cashman, who are both 2 of the most effective blitzing linebackers in the NFL. And so you've got 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. And then maybe Harrison Smith's also on the line of scrimmage. And if you're the opposing offense, you can't really afford to have anybody one-on-one, but you also can't afford to just have 3 players on the route. And it becomes a really dangerous game for the offense. It just does. And so I mean, you can see the smile on my face if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, you can probably hear it because it's already been like you almost feel for the opposing quarterback and offense, just knowing what exists for them in terms of the challenge. And now that challenge is even it's just risen to another level. I mean, I could go on. Bring back Byron Murphy Jr., who is a versatile guy. He can play outside on the left side. He can play outside on the right side. He can line up in the slot against, receivers who are motioning to the slot. He's willing to drop in the deep half, which some cornerbacks, not only are they not willing to do it, but they also just don't have that skill set, the vision, the processing ability to do all of that on the field, on the fly. That's why he was as much of a priority as he was, which I talked about and wrote about frequently at The Athletic and on this podcast. So you secured him, and then you bring a player with upside in Isaiah Rodgers, who I watched the film and I need to do more study, and I will because I now have time for it. I need to do more study of him, but I watched the film of Isaiah Rodgers against the Los Angeles Rams. He comes in the second half last year for Vic Fangio's system after Darius Slay suffered an injury. And you're watching Isaiah Rodgers. If you go you can go back and rewatch the game, it's there for you. You see him very competitive with Puka Nacua, maybe a 30-pound. Puka might have 30 pounds on Isaiah Rodgers, and a guy who is very hard to cover for anybody in the NFL, which is why he had the highest target share of any receiver in the NFL last year for the Rams. And you see Isaiah Rodgers no flinch, competitive at the catch point. He's slight. He might get beat. But he is feisty, and he played for Indianapolis before the entire situation, that the suspension. And had that not occurred, he probably would have remained a surefire starter for them. So I can't wait to see this guy in camp in the spring, in the summer. Watch him go line up across from a Jordan Addison and just see what that looks like. And I do think, it's cliche, but the iron will sharpen iron of him having to try to manage the releases of a Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, which can only help him. And then, you could talk about the Jordan Mason. I spoke about it in kind of the mailbag episode earlier this week. He had the 3rd highest rushing yards over expected per attempt behind Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. The guy's physical. He kind of does it his way. He relies on it's not the explosiveness and the speed, which is why he went undrafted out of Georgia Tech, but it is vision, it is quick processing, decision-making, and it is physicality. And if he can take some of the workload off Aaron Jones, and he can also pass protect to keep the defense at bay in terms of when he's on the field, you don't know if they are running it or if they are passing it. I think it leads us into a broader conversation down the line about when Kevin O'Connell arrived, their entire, ethos or like kind of vision was to marry the run and the pass. And what that really means is they wanted the defense to not have any idea pre-snap if this was going to be a run or a pass. And I feel like over the course of the last 3 years, oftentimes the defense can probably expect pass given certain personnel or certain situations. And I think the transition this offseason is to get back to, not to say the scheme's going to be what it was, because I think everything evolves in that regard, but from an identity perspective, to get back to what the original intent was, is to have maximum deception to where the defense is playing that pick your poison game of do you sell out for coverage against the elite receivers, or do you really believe that the Vikings are going to run it and smash it down your throat if you have two high safeties and if you're committing maximum coverage to Justin? You talk about Tavierre Thomas and Jeff Okudah and Tim Jones, who are potential special teams contributors. Rondale Moore has returned punts in the past. I don't know if he's ultimately going to be the primary punt returner because that requires a level of durability, and he hasn't done it a ton in the NFL, and he's also coming off of a major knee situation. But even a Rondale Moore as a gadget guy that defenses have to pay attention to when they also have to be attentive to Justin Jefferson's every positioning and every movement, and Jordan Addison's as well. I mean, it sounds like I'm doing a lot of raving. I get it. I'm not trying to be Mr. Rah-rah guy. If I was, probably wouldn't have, that's just the case. But it is hard not to look at all of these and think about what the team needed and not just view it as there was an overachievement of what they brought in. And it has this roster looking pretty formidable. So really looking forward to it. I'll be at owners meetings in West Palm Beach probably in 10 days or so. And then workouts will start early April. And I mean, being out there for those is going to be very fascinating, very interesting in a lot of aspects. And I can't wait to do it. Can't wait to chronicle it on the show. This is more of a short episode, but I just want to pop in. Wanted a show late in the week. Give you some of my thoughts about some stuff that really I hadn't I had not gotten really deep with. So it was fun to do it, and hopefully more of it coming with guests in the next few weeks. So appreciate you guys being here. That's episode 69 of the Alec Lewis Show. Nice. If you're new here, please subscribe on YouTube, rate, review on Spotify, Apple. I think we got some fun stuff coming down the line as well. So just stay locked in. And appreciate you guys spending your time listening. We'll be back next week. Stories over at The Athletic. And gratitude for you guys being here, taking the time. Talk to you guys very soon.